Training fighters is a very complicated process. I always watch those Rocky movies when they kind of start out and they have all of these crazy tricks like chasing chickens and God knows what else they do. And that's cool. It's cool, and that's a very important part of keeping a fighter motivated. But I want to talk today much more about, instead of the cool tricks like that, much more of the fundamental strategies of training fighters and running a fight team. And that's what it really comes down to is the initial structure that you put in. What I mean by initial structure is on every level, personality-wise. I don't have a PowerPoint. I wish I had something really cool for you guys to look at, so I'll just use my hand. Number one. Guys, the initial structure on personality is very important, meaning that you need to set up a dynamic between you and your fighter that connects you. In other words, if you let your fighter get away with being real mouthy, and all fighters are mouthy, I mean, that's their job, they're fighters. So when you talk to them, they're always, I know better, and this and that. So if you don't set up a structure early on, and I mean when you first start working with somebody, be it a brand new student or somebody that comes to you from another school, if you don't set up that structure initially, it's just going to come back to haunt you in the years to come. So what you have to do is establish that respect. Now there's a couple ways you can do that. You can, if you're already like, a super tough guy, you can roll around with your fighter, you can spar with them, you can show them that you're in there to, that you have technique, you have credibility. Like myself, I'm kind of a little guy, so when, giant people like Rashad smash me all over the place, that's kind of hard for me to do. So another structure that you can set up, and one that I really like in addition to sparring with your guys and rolling around with them, if you're not able to do that, or in addition to, is you really got to show them that you care about them and you know what you're doing. And that's really important. Now, the way I show I care about my fighters, and again, I always get razzed for this, but I actually tell them you don't have to pay me any money. If you want to pay me money, that's fine. If you don't want to pay me money, that's fine, because I'm not here for the money. I'm here for you to make sure that you go all the way to make sure I can give you everything I can. Now, that's crazy to most people, and it's hard to run an organization like that, especially when you have a ton of fighters. But that's one of the methods that I use directly to show these fighters that actually I'm not about the money. I'm 100% about making these guys the best they can be. So that starts building that trust right away. Then you got to know what you're doing. That takes a little bit more time. Showing that you know what you're doing means that you have to be organized. You can't just come up to a guy and be like, today I think we should kickbox. Kickboxing sounds great. And tomorrow we need to grapple, because that's part of the fight too. You need to know what you're doing. You need to have a plan, which we'll talk about here in a second. But that initial structure, guys, it doesn't seem like a big deal. Like nobody really... When you first meet a fighter, or you first start working, and I'm talking even if you're bringing up students from just this guy, he comes off the street, doesn't know anything, you have to set up that initial structure early, because it's sensitive dependence on initial conditions. That's not just the leading line of chaos theory, that's actually the leading line of all combat sports, for me. So if you set up that initial structure personality-wise, it's really going to pay in the back end, because listen, if your fighter gets successful, that's where it really starts to come into its own. If your fighter keeps losing, it's going to be a tough thing, you know what I mean? You can keep working. But over the years that I've trained people, I've seen success be the biggest obstacle to growth, to furthering your desires, to everything. When people get successful, it's like Abraham Lincoln said, if you want to test a man's character, you give him success. But if you put that initial structure where you guys have that bond between each other, and it's a strong...